And that holds true with regard to the conventional narrative of the final status talks. If you pick up any newspaper, you will always see final status talks which deal with an independent Palestinian state, which deal with Palestinian refugees, which deals with the issue of settlements and the like. I'm saying that that's a selective, prejudicial narrative. Not just selective and prejudicial to the Israeli case and cause, selective and prejudicial to the truth. And since this is a conference, and there is here underlying it, Alan said, a commitment to Emet, to truth, and to Veritas, and the like, we have to say that whenever you speak of an independent Palestinian state, fine. You have to also speak of the legitimacy of a Jewish state in the Middle East. That whenever you speak about the issue of settlements, you have to speak about the issue of state-sanctioned incitement and terror. That whenever you speak about Palestinian refugees, you have to speak about Jewish refugees from Arab countries. And if I may take, I know I've got just several minutes left, I just want to give you one vignette because it was so compelling. Several years ago, I addressed a group almost entirely of non-Jewish lawyers in Quebec. I was addressing it on the 60th anniversary of the Genocide Convention. I went through 5 major lessons of the last 60 years. What have we learned? What must we do? I won't burden you with that. But when I finished my talk, a woman got up and she said, you know, that she introduced herself as having been a lawyer when I was a Minister of Justice and now still a lawyer there, that there was always a question that she wanted to ask me, and now she had the opportunity to do so. She said that in your review of the last 60 years, and I had spoken for about 40 minutes with her, and your 5 lessons of the last 60 years, she said, you didn't make any reference to Palestinian suffering. You didn't make any reference, she says, to the Palestinian Nakba, to the catastrophe that occurred to the Palestinians, and I was giving this talk in 2007, catastrophe that occurred to Palestinians in 1947. Can you tell me why you didn't say anything about Palestinian suffering and why you didn't say anything about the Palestinian Nakba, the catastrophe to the Palestinian people? And I said, no, you're right, I said. The Palestinians have suffered and continue to suffer. I said, you're right. The Palestinians did suffer a Nakba, a catastrophe, 60 years ago. I said, but what happened 60 years ago? And what is the lesson that, you're right, I didn't speak about it, but now that we are, that comes out of that, of 60 years ago? I said 60 years ago, the United Nations recommended, by way of a partition resolution, the partition of the then Palestine Mandate into 2 states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. I said the Jewish leadership at the time accepted the resolution. The Arab and Palestinian leadership at the time rejected it. I said, mind you, they had a right to reject it if they wished. What they didn't have a right to do, was to then launch an aggressive war against Israel, which they spoke of, not me, in their own words, as a war of extermination against Israel. What they didn't have a right to do was to then launch a war of aggression against their own Jewish nationals, disenfranchising them of their citizenship, dispossessing them of their property, detaining them, brutalizing them, torturing them, deporting them. So at the end of the day, I said you had 2 sets of refugees, Palestinian Arab refugees and Jewish refugees from Arab lands. I said it's a tragedy to think that had the leadership at the time accepted the Palestinian Arab, accepted what was then the 2-people, 2-state solution, we would today be celebrating and commemorating 60 years of an Israeli-Palestinian Arab peace without any refugees on either side. She then got up and, while I'm telling you the story, said, you know, I have to tell you, this is the first I've ever, she said, I consider myself a well-educated, well-informed woman and lawyer. And she was. This is the first I've ever heard about Jewish refugees from Arab countries. She said, I knew about Palestinian refugees, but I always thought that that was the result of ethnic cleansing by the Jews, you know, on the occasion of the UN partition resolution. She says, I now realize, if I may say so, that there wasn't just a Nakba for the Palestinians, there was a Nakba for the Jews. If I may use the term, double Nakba. And I'm beginning to appreciate who is responsible. And so I say we have to put the question of Jewish refugees from Arab countries as a priority on our agenda, on the justice agenda. There are other matters that time does not permit to go in as to what we need to do in this regard. I'll close just with one of them, and that is, when we seek to make the case against lawfare, against the laundering of delegitimization under the cover of law, and making the case at the same time, if you make it for Israel, if you make it solely as being a case for the state of Israel, particularly in the way all the narratives are being framed, you simply may not have standing to make the case to begin with. What we have to do at this point, and I say this in terms of someone who cares about the integrity of the UN, of human rights, of international law, of the struggle against racism and the like, is to say that the laundering of delegitimization of Israel under the cover of law is, in effect, destroying the integrity of the United Nations, eroding the authority of international law, corrupting the language and principles of human rights, diminishing the real struggle against racism, and utterly, utterly corrupting the struggle against genocide. We have to make the case in terms of the interests of the people in the United States, Canada, Europe, etc., with respect to all these things that they claim to care about. UN, international law, human rights, struggle against racism, struggle against, and say all these things are being assaulted by the laundering of delegitimization under the cover of law. And so I close by saying that I can say what I say and feel what I feel because I come to the support of Israel, not because simply it's a Jewish cause. It would not be enough for me because it's a Jewish cause. I come to the support of Israel because I believe profoundly that it's a just cause. With all its imperfections, it is an authentic, just cause. And if it's a just cause, then it deserves the support of all people, men and women of goodwill, who care about justice and who care about human rights and who care about human dignity. And as our sages tell us, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, that ultimately truth and justice will prevail. Thank you.